Tonight, panic and bloodshed as terrorists unleash attacks in Paris. More than 120 people dead in horrific acts committed in the name of Islamic State. And as the world unites to condemn the atrocities, authorities here promise increased security across Melbourne.
Live from Melbourne, this is 7 News with Jennifer Keyte.
Good evening. Paris has woken after its long night of unimaginable slaughter at the hands of Islamic State terrorists. So far, at least 120 people are confirmed dead and many more are injured, including an Australian. A concert hall, stadium and restaurant were among the targets, while around 100 hostages were murdered in a theatre before police stormed the building. The synchronised attacks were coordinated to cause fear across the French capital, with gunmen and suicide bombers striking at 6 separate locations. Hugh Whitfeld is in Paris tonight and begins our coverage.
It started around 9:30 on Friday the 13th. At least 6 coordinated gun and bomb attacks across Paris, the worst at the Bataclan concert venue in the 11th arrondissement. Just half a kilometre from the scene of January's Charlie Hebdo massacre. American rock band Eagles of Death Metal was playing a sold-out concert for 1,500 fans when gunmen armed with AK-47s opened fire. As many as 60 were killed outright, 100 taken hostage.
When I went on the streets, I've seen 20 to 25 bodies lying on the floor. People were very badly injured, gunshot wounds.
Then other attacks at Le Carillon Hotel restaurant a kilometre north. At least 10 people were seen in the street, either dead or seriously wounded. Also at Rue Charon, Les Halles Market, the Belle Equipe Bar, all roughly the same area east of the city centre, but also 8 kilometres north, this. Suicide bombings at the city's major football stadium where a friendly match between France and Germany was underway. Reports of at least 40 killed there. Some thought it was fireworks.
Now firecrackers being let off in and around the stadium.
Among the spectators, French President François Hollande.
Être décidé dans toute l'île de France.
He declared a state of emergency, hospitals on alert, borders closed, schools and colleges shut, and thousands of police and troops ordered into the streets. At the Bataclan venue, gunmen began executing people. They are killing us one by one, hostages tweeted from the concert hall. Police had no choice. They launched an immediate assault. But more hostages died as explosives were thrown into the crowd. 3 terrorists detonated suicide belts rather than be taken alive.
The death toll is at least 100 and rising.
Residents of Paris were told to go home and stay indoors. Some metro lines were closed, but taxi drivers offered free rides to anyone who was stranded. Australians were caught in the terror.
A SWAT caravan came and guys jumped out with their flak jackets and their semi-automatic machine guns. And it was actually really scary. There was a corpse covered in foil, gold foil. And then there were people getting emergency treatment with drips and IVs and all that. And it's not the type of thing you want to watch.
It was quite frightening, obviously not knowing Paris well. We didn't know kind of how close we were. I was absolutely frightened and just wanted to kind of get to the safest place possible.
Islamic State has now claimed responsibility. The attacks come 2 weeks before a major climate conference in Paris and 2 days before the G20 in Turkey. President Hollande went to the Bataclan concert hall and said terrorists would be fought without mercy after the deadliest day in Paris since World War II.
Cette tragédie, l'abomination.
This tragedy, this abomination committed by barbarians.
In Paris, Hugh Whitfeld, 7 News.
Flowers and candles have been left at the French consulate in St Kilda Road as Melbourne pays its respects to the victims. And plans have been announced for a candlelight vigil to be held at Federation Square on Monday evening at 6. Victoria's Chief Police Commissioner says security will be beefed up on Melbourne streets, at transport hubs and public events in the wake of the attacks. Live now to Paul Dowsley. Paul, what else did he have to say?
Jen, Graham Ashton stressed there is no intelligence to connect Victoria or Victorians with what we saw this morning in Paris, but he still is bringing in additional officers across the weekend, particularly here to Etihad Stadium for the UFC event, that headline fight between Ronda Rousey and Holly Holm tomorrow, which is set to attract 55,000 fans.
We'll put some additional security around that event, and you'll also see some additional visible police presence around our public transport system through the rest of the weekend. That's not in relation to any specific threats, because there are none. This is just in relation to being extra cautious.
Police will also be focusing additionally on the City to Sea fun run tomorrow, which will attract 12,000 people, plus nightclubs and pubs and bars tonight across Melbourne. The state government will be lowering flags at State Parliament. This afternoon we saw French flags lowered at Treasury Place, and tonight, when the sun goes down, the MCG, the Arts Centre Spire, the National Gallery and our Town Hall will be bathed in red, white and blue in solidarity with France. Jen.
Thank you very much, Paul. Well, the attacks on a cold evening in Paris took France by surprise as the terrorists killed without mercy or explanation. Let's now go to Chris Reason to see where they went and what happened when they got there.
The first reports of gunfire were in an area just north of the tourist district, not far from the Charlie Hebdo offices. A gunman opened fire at the Carillon Bar before crossing the street to a Cambodian restaurant, killing 14 people and seriously injuring 20 others. At 9:17 p.m. further north, there were two more explosions near the National Stadium, where France and Germany's soccer teams were playing a friendly with the French president in the crowd. 4 people died and 50 were wounded. 10 minutes later, back in the city centre, the deadliest attack was unleashed. Gunmen burst into the Bataclan concert hall and started firing indiscriminately. At one stage, they were shooting hostages one by one before the police stormed the building. Around 120 were executed all up before 4 terrorists were killed, 3 detonating suicide vests. Less than a kilometre away, another restaurant was targeted, La Belle Equipe. 19 were shot dead there, 23 wounded. Just 500 metres away, 4 more were also killed and 20 more wounded near a public square at Avenue de la République. And near the Bastille, 7 people were wounded near the Rue Beaumarchais. Now, these attacks were off the tourist route. The area has been called the Golden Triangle of Parisian youth culture. In other words, it was a direct attack on French tolerance.
Chris Reason there. Well, counter-terrorism experts are alarmed at the level of planning needed to carry out such a series of attacks. But analysts are divided on whether they were triggered by huge Islamic State losses in Syria and Iraq this week, especially that of the high-profile jihadi who executed prisoners on camera.
Jihadi John was the faceless face of Islamic State.
Our knife will continue to strike the necks of your people.
Mohammed Umwazi was himself killed as Allied drones launched a Hellfire missile, incinerating the executioner.
The terrorists associated with Daesh need to know this. Your days are numbered.
IS suffered another setback in northern Iraq, with Kurdish forces retaking the town of Sinjar. The victory has cut crucial supply lines. Islamic State has claimed its own recent inhuman victories. A bombing in Beirut killed 40 and injured 200. A group connected with Islamic State claims to have brought down the Russian airliner over Egypt. In March, 21 tourists were murdered in a terror attack at a Tunisia museum. 3 months later, 38 were killed in a resort near the Tunisian city of Sousse. The Paris attacks mark a shift from small-scale and lone wolf operations.
They found a way of flying beneath the radar, perhaps meeting face-to-face
passing notes handwritten on paper, staying off the digital grid.
The Paris terrorists might have used the 2008 assault on Mumbai as a model for their deadly rampage.
Small groups, suicide groups, attacking across the city, confusing people, confusing and stretching very thin the police resources.
Causing new security concerns not just in Paris, but around the world and here at home. Damien Smith, 7 News.
Hugh Whitfeld is on the streets of Paris tonight outside the Bataclan concert hall. Hugh, what's the situation there now?
Well, Jen, this city is slowly waking to terrible news. Many of the people would have gone to bed last night hoping that the news would not have got worse, and of course it did. It did get much worse. We're about a block from the concert hall where the most horrific attack took place. More than 100 people killed inside there. There is a large security presence here and right across the city this morning. 1,500 military personnel being deployed, as well as police and firefighters right across Paris. The city's 36 major hospitals are dealing with around 200 people who were injured in these attacks. Now, among them is one Australian, reportedly to be a Tasmanian, Emma Grace Parkinson. We don't know her condition, but we do know that there are around 80 people in hospital who are listed as critical.
Hugh, have authorities confirmed how many attackers died?
Well, there were certainly as many as 8 terrorists who were killed as part of the operation. Now, 7 of them took their own life. They were wearing suicide belts and essentially blew themselves up as police closed in. The 8th was shot dead by security forces inside the concert hall. Now, French authorities say it is possible that there could be accomplices who are still at large, and that's why we're seeing such a big security presence here this morning. There were quite severe security and emergency security measures put in place overnight as well, a state of emergency. That is now being brought back. Flights are now operating in and out of Paris's 2 major airports, and Eurostar services are running to London as well. That will mean that people who want to get out of here can. Jen?
Hugh, you were on the streets of Paris as this terrible event unfolded. What was that like for you?
Well, it was pretty clear that something was up when we just saw so many emergency vehicles with sirens and lights going all in the one direction, not 1 or 2, but a dozen or so, and it became pretty clear that something was up. And then there was a concern for people that you knew here and making sure that everyone could get to a safe place. And that's what pretty much everyone in the city was trying to do, get home, get to somewhere where they felt safe. Now, people are being told pretty much to stay close to home today, but you can guarantee over the next 24, 48 hours, Parisians will hit the streets in the same way that we saw after Charlie Hebdo to show that they will stand up for their liberty. Jen?
OK, thank you very much. Hugh Whitfeld in Paris. Malcolm Turnbull has expressed Australia's sympathy for the French people, saying the nations of the world stand united against terrorism. Political editor Mark Riley is travelling with the Prime Minister in Berlin.
Malcolm Turnbull learned of the attacks in the very early hours of the morning here in Berlin, where he's been meeting with the German Chancellor Angela Merkel. He made a statement a short time ago in which he expressed Australia's solidarity with the people of France. He said we stand shoulder to shoulder with that country. And he echoed the words of President Obama that this wasn't just an attack on the people of Paris, but an attack on humanity. He said that freedom stands up for itself and its values in the face of terrorism. Let's have a listen.
Paris, France, the home of freedom, has been assaulted by terrorists determined to attack and suppress freedom, not just in France, but throughout the world.
Malcolm Turnbull's been getting briefings throughout the early hours of the morning here in Germany from our security and intelligence agencies back in Australia and from Foreign Minister Julie Bishop. He said that our alert level in Australia will remain at high and that he was confident our security agencies were doing all they could to secure the safety of the Australian people. He had a very strong statement to make about the genesis of this attack and those people who are claiming they are acting on the behalf of their religious beliefs.
Protecting Australians, protecting freedom is a global battle. It is a global struggle for freedom against those who seek to suppress it and seek to assert some form of religious tyranny, a threat in the name of God, but is truthfully the work of the devil.
Malcolm Turnbull is due to go to Paris in the next fortnight to represent Australia at the UN Climate Change Conference. He will leave in the next couple of hours from here in Berlin to fly to Antalya in southern Turkey for the G20 meeting of world leaders. That was to be an economic summit. It will now obviously become a summit on the risk of global terrorism after these events. Those leaders include the US President Barack Obama, the Russian President Vladimir Putin, and others. Many of them will move then to the Philippines for the APEC meeting, where again the threat on the streets of the cities of the world from terrorism will dominate. Back to you.
Thanks, Mark. Mark Riley there in Berlin. US President Barack Obama has described the atrocities as being an attack on humanity and our universal values. That view's been echoed by leaders around the world who've pledged support for France while condemning the slaughter of innocent victims.
The deadly attacks left devastation across Paris and sent shockwaves across the rest of the world.
This is an attack on all of humanity and the universal values that we share.
A horrific attack on innocent people which Americans know all too well.
Whenever these kinds of attacks happened, we've always been able to count on the French people to stand with us. They have been an extraordinary counterterrorism partner, and we intend to be there with them in that same fashion.
Canada's new Prime Minister has French roots.
Obviously our hearts and thoughts and prayers go out to our French cousins.
World leaders have also expressed their shock on social media. The fear has spread globally. London's landmarks and airports across Europe are under high alert. In New York, extra law enforcement officers armed with high-powered weapons have been sent to the French consulate, the World Trade Center and other popular tourist areas. There's been no direct threats to the US, but terror experts say authorities should be concerned about how the highly coordinated attacks went under the radar.
It is surprising. The French are incredibly effective in counterterrorism, and they strengthened their laws after the Charlie Hebdo attack. I think there probably will be found to be some communications, possibly using encryption, which kept the French officials from seeing this.
On an interview that went to air just before the attacks, as IS was forced out of a key town in Iraq, President Obama claimed Islamic State is contained.
Our goal has been first to contain, and we have contained them. They have not gained ground in Iraq.
An assessment many would question tonight. As the world comes to terms with senseless terror, it continues to pray for Paris and peace. Mike Amor, 7 News.
Australia's terror threat level will remain as it is for now. Intelligence agencies have advised that the Paris attacks were directed solely at France and weren't part of a wider global strike.
Our Prime Minister called it an attack on freedom, not just in France but throughout the world. Every democracy felt it, Australia no different.
Unimaginable what they are going through right now.
Coincidentally, police had scheduled this news conference to detail a counter-terrorism arrest at home over last month's deadly attack on Sydney Police headquarters.
We now live in a global world, and events that happen anywhere do have an impact on all of us.
But without the suggestion the atrocities of Paris are part of a global coordinated strike, Australian authorities are unlikely to be any more concerned about security here today than yesterday. The alert level is already at high.
At this stage, we do not intend to change the threat level.
2,500 Australians are registered in France. Our government estimates there are thousands more.
People should not leave their hotels, not travel, wait this out.
And in Melbourne today, a message from the French ambassador to maintain our values in the face of barbarity.
Not a message of terror, not a message of death, not a message of blood. We have to keep our values alive.
Robert Ovadia, 7 News.
And if you have family in Paris and want to check if they're all right, you can call the Foreign Affairs hotline. The number is 1300 555 135. Also, if you can't contact someone on the phone, Facebook is asking any users in Paris to confirm that they're safe. An alert will be posted on that person's homepage. Well, Victorians heading to France have had to rethink their travel plans. Georgia Main is at Melbourne Airport. Georgia, what more can you tell us?
Jen, a number of connecting flights to Paris have left from Melbourne today, although earlier some people were actually taken off their flight after reports that the airport in Paris was closed. Other passengers have told us that they've been told that they can go as far as Abu Dhabi or Singapore and then reassess from there.
I'll be stopping in Singapore and trying to get an update at that particular point of view. I have thought about not going. It's certainly one of the first things that goes through your mind.
We've got to carry on our lives, otherwise they will win.
I think you're always concerned about travelling, but I think also what do you do?
Now, passengers have been told to contact individual airlines for any updates and have been told that they should expect increased security and identity checks once they are in Europe. Jen?
Thanks very much, Georgia. Well, to the rest of the day's news now, and a mother's told of her fears after her 13-year-old daughter disappeared with a man she met on Facebook. That's after the break on 7 News. Also, the arrest of a man wanted over a hit run on Eastlink. Ronda Rousey fans out in force for the UFC weigh-in.
And good news on the weather front with more mild sunshine heading our way.